You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
Mark, I have a Stackwaddy game. Which
Hurrah. Always keen.
Always keen. It's been sent in by a friend of the pod, Al Wallace, and this one's with a bit of a difference. It's entirely based on the wilder schemes of Brian Wilson, okay?
Okay.
So of these 5 madcap wheezers, okay, only one of them actually came to pass.
Okay.
And you have to tell me what they are. So I'm going to go through them, okay? So number 1, for the barnyard section of Smile, Brian Wilson made a short 16mm film, the star of which was a hen in white tennis shoes. Okay, that's number 1. And number 2, during the recording of Hang On to Your Ego for Pet Sounds, he got the engineer to bring a horse into the recording session. That's number 2. Okay.
Right.
So hen number 1, horse number 2.
The hen is wearing, to be clear again, is wearing white tennis shoes.
Absolutely, fully dressed properly. You know, ready for Wimbledon.
Yeah.
Number 3, Brian Wilson at one stage wanted to be the next big thing in hip hop, so he recorded a rap song. Okay.
Yep.
We got hen, we got horse, we got rap.
We got rap. Okay.
Number 4, during the recording of Cool, Cool Water, it began to rain and he freaked out and flushed the tapes down the toilet.
Right.
And finally, number 5.
These are good.
And finally, number 5.
Of course, entirely plausible, it being Brian Wilson. But yeah, number 5.
Number 5, he wrote a symphony for drums. A symphony for drums. Okay, so of those 5, one of them is not true. One of them is true. I think.
One of them is true, though. One of them is true. I'm going to immediately, you don't have to give me the answer right yet, but I'm going to immediately discount the hip-hop rap song. That I simply cannot believe that happened. Flushing the tapes down the toilet after hearing the rain, I'm saying also, for I don't know what reason, but that clearly, I don't think that happened either. Symphony for drums is the kind of thing he would have done, actually. Well, they all are, let's be honest. But I'm going to say no to that too, which leaves me the horse in the recording studio or the hen with the tennis shoes. The hen could not have been wearing the tennis shoes. It's the horse. I'm right, aren't I?
Right, here we go. Okay.
Go on.
The hen in the white tennis shoes didn't actually happen. That was an idea that stayed in Brian's head.
Oh, right. But he did have that idea, did he?
He did have that idea.
Oh, that's brilliant.
He also had the idea for a symphony for drums, which didn't happen.
Yep.
The business about flushing the tapes down the toilet is not actually true. And the
so
one
between
about
the rap song and the horse.
Yeah, okay. And
I'm in the top 2.
Yeah, okay. The one that is actually true is the rap song.
No.
That's the one you said was definitely not true.
That's the one I instantly dismissed. You're kidding. What was it called?
It was called, okay, after watching Yo MTV, he thought rap lyrics degraded women. So he worked with hip-hop producer Matt Dyke, recorded his long-lost rap anthem, Smart Girls, for the unreleased Sweet Insanity album. So
Fantastic.
He actually did it.
That's a very, very strong Stackwaddy.
That's very good.
Al Wallace, that is extremely good work.
That's
it really
very
is.
good.
Although much of the heavy lifting, of course, was done by Brian Wilson himself.
He does.
So it didn't require any kind of ingenuity or creativity. Not much, anyway. That's very, very good one.
That's true.
Okay, well, I stand defeated.
So what have you been doing this week?
Well, look, I thought you didn't probably see the Wham documentary.
I didn't. No, go on. I read it.
Oh no, amazing! I just saw that. I saw that a couple of days ago. It just came out on Netflix by a guy called Chris Smith, the director, who was the guy who made the documentary about the Doomed Fire Festival in 2017. And I think his point was that Wham have always been sort of kind of joke, terrible hair, espadrilles, suntan lotion, cocktails. And that they deserved a decent version of their story. They were dismissed at the time, as you remember, by the press as himbo dimwits and all that kind of stuff. And I think they are an amazing story. You know, they only made a handful of singles. They only made 2 albums. It's an interesting documentary that doesn't use any talking heads. It's all old footage and TV clips and mostly an interview that George did for BBC Radio. And again, it is a motion story in that nobody falls out. There's only two people in this group. They adore each other. There's no friction. There's none of those usual elements that make something work. You know, they have almost instant success and bow out a few years later at Wembley Stadium. But I thought it was interesting because there's various patterns emerge. One is the immense advantage of having a parent who disapproves what you do. I feel strongly that this is a real driver. George's dad did not banned him at one point from using the stereo, banned him from buying records, wanted him to become an accountant. And, you know, that gives you, I think that's probably more of a sense of drive and compulsion than, you know, parents paying your stage school, you know, fees and buying you any instrument you want. Don't you think?
Yeah, no, true.
And I think it's also interesting that all musical stories, all arcs, consist, as far as I can see, of three things: of luck, of talent, and of drive. And the luck side of it is really interesting in their case. Andrew, aged 12, appoints and volunteers to be the person to look after George on his first day at big school when he's 11. And they both believe that moment when they were put together was what, you know, formed the friendship that may otherwise have never happened in this big class. You know, they put a cassette tape through the door of a guy from Innovision Records who lives down the road, Mark Dean, who gets them a deal. Incredible luck. Also, incredible luck, there was a very, very, very bad deal, and they made very little money out of it, and it forced them to get a new deal with Simon Napier Bell, and because they're only getting 4% each on each single. And it's Simon Napier Bell, really, that masterminds their success in America and the big Chinese tour and all that. And the other bit of luck is that there's a Top of the Pops cancellation. Young Guns had got to 42. Somebody couldn't make it, dropped out. They were called in, went on Top of the Pops and got to number 3 the next week. So those are kind of interesting, I think. And the drive is interesting because, you know, if you don't have that, you're never going to succeed. And there's George, you know, talking about the first tour they do and realizing that the sound of that crowd is completely addictive. He has to go back and taste that again. He's simply compelled to carry on getting on stage. And also is consumed with grief when he's made Last Christmas and he knows it's going to be the Christmas number 1 and is then called up to be on the Band-Aid single. Throughout the whole thing, all he can think about is the fact that he now won't be number 1. This is clearly going to be number 1. I think you need that kind of drive, really.
I never thought of that. Must have been why he was in a slightly bad mood.
He was. We were both there. He was. He seemed very preoccupied.
He was
yeah, and all the time he's thinking, he must have got there thinking, let's hope it's a really rubbish record. He goes, no, it's not a rubbish record. It's got a fantastic chorus. It mentions Christmas. It's got, you know, it's got bells.
It's got bells on it.
And he was absolutely guaranteed he was going to get his 4th number 1 with this record, you know. And then there's the talent side of it. There's lots of really interesting things about that. I think one of his most talented moments is that he identifies the Human League in 1981 as the way forward. It's the 2 girls in the Human League makes them this group that anybody can imagine they could join. You know, they have this amazingly connective thing with the audience. And he says, I'm going to do that. So he recruits DC Lee and Shirley to be the girls who are part of the group. And that's a major connective masterpiece, I think. And also it's a really clear idea of what he wants to sound like. There's a bit where they go off to record Careless Whisper with Jerry Wexler. This is amazing. Jerry Wexler. And he's recording in the studio where Aretha Franklin made, Respect, where Ray Charles recorded. He's standing on the very spot where Aretha Franklin stood. And all this. And at the end of it, he listened to it back and says, it's no good. And he's going to scrap it and do it all himself and produce it himself, which is incredible, really. Yeah. And another thing is where this is about sheer talent, is that he sacks Andrew Ridgeley from being a songwriting partner. You know, up to that point, Andrew Ridgeley has contributed to the songs. He said, if we're going to get anywhere, I'm going to do this on my own. So you're not going to do this anymore. Not only did Andrew Ridgeley accept that, but then decides he's going to give himself a role as being the kind of visual mastermind of Wham, and invents this whole idea of the sportswear and what they were, which is actually just almost as important in some ways. So I thought that was really interesting. But the reaction to it has been absolutely astonishing. A lot of it, I think, to do with the fact that anybody in their mid-50s is relating to this very powerful soundtrack for that particular period of their life. And also that it's a kind of antidote to what's going on at the moment. The guy did you read the New York Times review?
Well, that was exactly what I was going to raise.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing I read. And I think it was the New York Times review, certainly an American review. I think it was the New York Times.
Yeah.
And it struck me that in America, we've now moved on from identity politics we now have identity journalism.
Yeah.
And so all criticism of anything, and particularly pop music, is dogged by the fact that at some point at the beginning, probably at the beginning of paragraph 2, there 2 dreadful words will appear, and those will be a sentence beginning with "as a," you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As a woman, as a lesbian, as a Hispanic American, as a whatever, because that will have to be the point of view from which the review is written.
Absolutely.
And so what I found really irritating about this review was this kind of sniffy attitude towards what was supposedly white Britain's attitude to African American music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was somehow appropriated, and that Wham did a certain amount of this. And I just thought, this is incredibly superficial reading of British culture, British popular culture.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the world that George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley grew up in, that kind of North London, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, lower middle class, whatever, you know, Greek background, whatever. And I tell you, the only thing I discovered from that New York Times review that I'd never thought about it before, and I think it tells you a lot that I'd never thought about it before, was that Andrew Ridgeley was from Egyptian.
Egyptian, I know.
It never occurred to me. And it's only when I looked at his picture on the cover of the Radio Times this morning, I thought, God, yes.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
He looks Egyptian. But never, and I don't recall, you know, I was kind of editor of Smash Hits, as were you, round about the time of Wham's ascendancy. I don't remember that ever being mentioned.
No, it wasn't.
Do you?
No, it was all about George being Greek. Nothing about it at all.
Even that there wasn't that much about him being Greek at that point. You know, because the music that everybody who came from that kind of background knew was clubbing music.
It was soul, really.
It was a Gap band. It was the Crazy Daisy. It was the Southgate Royalty.
Yeah.
It was, you know, it was Furry Dice music. It was Robbie Vincent or Radio London. It was all that stuff. And nobody ever stopped to think about it as being African American or whatever.
No, not remotely.
It was just, you know, and what struck me thinking about it, it would amaze Chummy from the New York Times to be told that actually the most significant DJ figure in terms of the ascendancy of all that music over a period of more than 50 years is Tony
Blackburn.
Tony Blackburn.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there's nobody more vanilla than Tony Blackburn.
No, not remotely.
You know what I mean? But it was never seen as this is kind of black music or this is African American music. It was just music.
Yeah.
It really was. And some of it was played by, you know, black people, some of it played by white people, some of it played by people of Greek origin or Egyptian or whatever.
But as you say, everything now is being seen through this focus.
Tiny little lens.
Tiny lens of today's, today's correct viewpoints. And reevaluated, which is absolute nonsense.
I really got irritated with the review.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is the kind of review that I read all the time now.
Yeah.
And it's identity journalism.
Yeah.
And, you know, frankly, I've had enough.
Cultural appropriation.
The Word Podcast. Prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
So you got sent this clip, didn't you, by...
I got sent a clip, by Richard Morton Jack, who's the author of the fantastic Nick Drake book, who we interviewed the other day. And has been researching that whole early 70s period of Nick Drake for the book. And I'd come across this amazing clip of a group called Renia from 1974. And Renia were, we'll include it with this podcast, and I thought it was really interesting. They're kind of, plodding prog rock foot soldiers, aren't they? And there's 5 of them, and they've got their flares, and they've got their van. It's the entirely analog world of steaming up the M1 all the way to Liverpool to drive 500 miles there and back to make a profit of -£1, you know. And I thought it was just a really interesting time capsule into that particular world, don't you think? Of just when the only way you could get anywhere was if you're lucky enough to record deal, which they did, they were signed to Transatlantic, is that you're hoping you're going to create some kind of stage show that's sufficiently interesting to get written about or get some kind of press. Or if you're very, very lucky, get some radio, and extremely lucky, get some TV, which there are very few opportunities. And what a slog it all is. The five of them have their day jobs, don't they? You know, and they're hiring their vans and spend their entire life in blue ball services, trogging up the motorway to play their slightly indifferent music. What did you make of it?
I thought it was a really interesting example of a thread that goes all the way through British broadcasting.
Yeah.
And I'm sure somebody ought to be able to put together a page on YouTube just made up of little documentaries made about groups that never got anywhere.
Yeah.
All about how hard it is to get somewhere. And these documentaries could have been made in the 60s, could have been made in the 70s, 80s, 90s. You know, it's very kind of look at life.
Yes.
Type way. Do you realize, viewers, that people form pop groups, they're not instantly really rich. And this comes as a shock to the people making the film. Renia, I thought were quite interesting in that I'd love to talk to them now.
Absolutely.
And there are probably a bunch of blokes in the latter half of their 70s, probably. And they must look back on that thing and how stupid were we, you know.
I know.
What do we expect the world to do for us?
I was thinking the same thing. As if you found them, you could make a really nice little tight documentary about it, you know. And there's a moment where you get to them. One of them, I think, has got a job as a surveyor or something.
Yeah, there's two of them got jobs. They work.
And the others, two of them, Kenny and Dave, who have a job washing dishes together in a little restaurant. And there's some amazing lines. One of them says, "If Renia don't make it," this is the voiceover. Kenny and Dave have little else to look forward to.
Well, Renia, here's the news. Now, you know, I pride myself on knowing quite a lot about 70s failed rock and roll bands, you know, because I worked in record shops during that time.
Had you heard of Renia? Because actually I hadn't.
I hadn't. And so I really racked my brains and I looked at the album cover and thought, I could just about really dimly recall it. Now, they were signed to Transatlantic. The Transatlantic label, with all due respect, was not the place to break a rock and roll group. Although, to be fair, they had Stray. Do you remember Stray?
Yes.
In all the pictures?
They were on great hair.
They're on Transatlantic, but mainly Transatlantic. It was kind of folky stuff. It was Griffon. It was Billy Connolly. It was that kind of thing.
Yeah, Griffon's Midnight Mushrumps album. Somebody playing a crumhorn.
So by signing to Transatlantic, they weren't exactly buying themselves a winning ticket in the lottery of popular music. But anyway, I did a bit of research, Mark. I did some digging on the internet. I haven't told you about this. Okay? And it took a lot of doing. And because there really isn't much about them out there, you know, because they pretty much disappeared without trace. The singer went on to be the singer in a group called Dirty Dricks, who made a few albums for Polydor in the mid-70s.
Oh, right, okay.
Didn't really do anything. But anyway, I want to draw your attention to somebody who left the group just before that film was made, okay? And
you're going to tell me he went on to be enormously successful.
He was a drummer.
Oh, my Lord.
And he left just before the record.
Was he successful in his own right? Was he successful?
Can I just tell the story?
Oh, go on. Yeah.
The drummer left just before the record was made, and obviously just before the film was made. And he went on to devote himself to his day job, which was selling ad space on Beat Instrumental magazine.
Yeah.
Do you remember Beat
I do.
And he was very good at it. So he left, and he was emboldened sufficiently to start his own magazine, which was International Musician and Recording World.
Oh, my God.
Which he built with a partner into a very profitable title, from which he diversified into Asian babes
No.
44 other specialist porn magazines. He eventually...
It's not Felix Dennis, is it? No.
He eventually launched OK Magazine to compete with Hello. And he made so much money, he bought Express newspapers. And he eventually bought Channel 5. And they always make jokes about the drummer being the thick one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, obviously this drummer realized that there was a better future in selling magazines to people who dreamed of being rock stars.
Dreamed of being members of Renia.
Rather than trying to be a rock star himself. And that drummer was Richard Desmond.
That's phenomenal. Richard Desmond, of course, this makes complete sense because he has a band, or had a band, called Richard Desmond's All-Stars, in which he played the drums.
With the singers, people like Robert Plant and Roger
Plant and various people are in it. Exactly, Roger Daltrey. All these old muckers from back in the day. That's an amazing story, isn't it?
And that is the most wonderful illustration of, what they always use, I think it's brilliant, the idea of him thinking, well, this is a mug's game pretending to be, I'm going to be a successful rock star in this group. I know I'll sell products to people who want to be rock stars. And so they always used to say about the 1849 gold rush in California. You know what they say about that? They say the only people who made any money
people selling shovels.
People who sell the shovels.
That's right, yeah.
And that's what this is like.
True. Yeah.
So that's, that's what's happened. That's what happened with Renia. And it's a tale with learning for all of us.
Oh, it is. There's the one very poignant moment, and I thought of you in it actually, where you meet their PR girl, you meet the head of the record company, who's Nat Joseph, isn't he, from Transatlantic, who's rather pompous about it all. But you also meet their plugger, a guy called Rick Hopper. And Richard Morton Jack had said he discovered that this guy had been in Cambridge with Nick Drake as a friend of his and put on the first Nick Drake concerts. So he's a very, very intelligent and rather shy and very middle class Cambridge University graduate, and he's now become a record plugger. And there he is in these flares with his shoulder bag full of albums, going into the BBC to go and see, I think it's Jeff Griffin and Bob Harris. Certainly whispering Bob Harris, who's wearing, of course, a tank top. And it's just this wonderful scene that's been filmed where he goes in and says, hi, I've got this great record by Renia, and I think I dropped off last week, and I wonder if you'd heard it. And they very sweetly and very diplomatically say that they don't think it amounts to very much. And, of course, as a plugger, what can you do? You can't really argue. You can't say you're wrong. I can remember times I stood in for John Peel and various people in Radio 1 early 80s, sitting in producers' offices, people like Chris Lycett, and the pluggers would come in. I can remember one guy coming with an Iron Maiden record and saying, you've got to play this, it's fantastic. And he said, well, it's really not our kind of thing. And I'm not sure if I would like it very much. I remember him just leaving and then turning back and saying, it's a muscular ballad. And that was his kind of line. That was his sell that he'd invented to try and make you take one different look at it, I was thinking, what a tough old job. Because you were doing that, but not long after, you were going around Radio 1, weren't you? With your bag and your Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers records or whatever it would have been.
It's a nightmare job in that if you say, have you listened to so-and-so, what do you think of it? And their initial response is lukewarm. Nothing is going to change that, really. Yeah. You can't say anything that's going to change it. The only thing that I've realized, and I probably realized over time, actually, and which applies to radio people, and it applies to media people generally, is that the only thing they're susceptible to is the fact that there might be enthusiasm for the record elsewhere that they don't share.
Yeah.
And so the worst thing in the world is if a plugger comes in and says, what do you think of so-and-so? And you go, nah, I don't like it, it's rubbish. And then your competition down the corridor gets on it and it proves to be really popular.
Yeah.
Then you look a fool. And so radio people are herd animals, completely herd animals. Yeah. That's what they're interested in. What's the story? What's the plot? Has everybody else bought into it?
Yeah.
If everybody else buys into it, I will buy into it.
Because I don't want to be made to look ridiculous by being the person who's left out of it all.
That's the way it works. They're not. they're not rugged independents. They're not.
And also there's that thing, that kind of
creatures.
pride. Yeah, once you've said that you don't like something, it's absolutely impossible to then turn around and start playing it, because you've nailed your colours to the mast. So, it's very, very hard.
So anyway, talking about inside entertainment, behind the scenes, I've this week started watching once again.
Oh, right.
And I may disappear for some time just watching this. The Larry Sanders Show.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen it? You never seen it?
I don't know if I have. No,
okay.
That's terrible.
Well, let me explain it. It ran between 1992 and 1998. So it's, it's 30 years old.
Yeah.
And it's basically, it's behind the scenes of a talk show, of a nightly talk show of the kind of Johnny Carson, David Letterman, those kind of things. And it's got 3 key characters in it. One is Gary Shandling, who plays Larry Sanders, the host, who's just wants to be loved, as a host do.
Yeah.
And then Jeffrey Tambor as Hank Kingsley, who's his sidekick, the guy who sits on the sofa and kind of laughs at his jokes. So he surfs completely at the pleasure of Larry Sanders.
Yeah.
And the third and probably key figure is Artie, who's the producer. Artie is the most brilliant depiction of a TV producer I've ever met. Because basically, scratch any TV producer, and they have no morals whatsoever. All that a TV producer cares about is it working? Is it
ratings.
Working? How's my ratings doing? I will do anything. I will do absolutely anything for ratings. And oh God, it's brilliant. It's I hesitate to say dark, but it's just immensely realistic in the sense that all those people care about, they're completely umbilically connected to the success of that TV show night after night. And that then led me to go back and read, have you ever read Kenneth Tynan's 1978 profile of Johnny Carson in the New Yorker?
No, I haven't. No,
I remember our old mate Al Clark. You remember Al Clark used to be head of press at Virgin.
Virgin head of press, incredible.
And went on to produce Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and all sorts.
One of the funniest people on the telephone.
One of the funniest, to in my absolutely. Life. Have you ever read any old features
Alan
about XTC?
Oh yeah,
Al Clark was usually in there because Al kind of made XTC in the sense that he loved XTC.
He loved them so much, didn't he? Yeah.
But anyway, he's very funny. And Al remember saying this to me in the late 70s. He said, "You've got to read this. It's the greatest profile of anybody in entertainment ever done." And I read it again this week, and it is absolutely extraordinary because it's about Johnny Carson, who became rich and famous for mastering this really odd skill, which is to be a late night TV host. So he's mastering a skill which is not transferable to any other field. You can't go and do it on stage. You can't take it anywhere. You can't put it in a film. It just works in this really odd format.
It's so peculiar.
But it's been developed. And there's a lot of explanations how it works, which I'd never fully absorbed. They record these things earlier in the evening, like 5:30 or whatever, to be broadcast. There's a little bit of time for editing. And so they bring a guest on, and the guest is very often a comedian. And the producer, the arty figure, is not in the gallery. The producer is a few feet away from them on the studio floor, watching it on a monitor. And if he doesn't feel it's going as well as it should do, he just holds up a sign to the presenter saying commercial. And so the presenter goes at really irregular points, goes, we're going to
take a break now. We'll see you after these messages.
And so basically there's 2 minutes during which the producer comes on, whispers in the ear of the presenter, what the bloody hell are we going to do here or whatever. And if you're the poor bozo guest who's sitting
who immediately knows that you're not, you're not delivering the goods.
So it comes back to the host after the commercials. And the host may say, so anyway, tell us another funny story about your mother. Or the host may say, my next guest
Oh, no, really? My Lord.
Are you the person to see that?
Oh, my God.
Just shuffle down the sofa, make room. You're cast out into the entertainment.
And then required to not butt in at all. Actually.
Absolutely.
Just be a complete spare part for the next 30 minutes.
Not butt in at all.
And watch someone else who's effortlessly entertained and has the entire audience, falling about laughing.
But it's fascinating to watch these things, because you'd obviously watch all these chat shows in a million pieces on YouTube nowadays, or you can watch Gary Chandling, Larry Sanders, and so forth. And what's extraordinary about the American chat show format is that on the surface it's immensely relaxed. Here my old mate so just popped in. Where have you been? Tell us a story about what happened to you yesterday. It's so apparently so loose. Underneath it all is power politics that the Medicis would have been terrified by. People's careers are just getting boosted or torpedoed in seconds during those programs. It's absolutely extraordinary. You must watch it.
You're prepared to do it because the value of being a hit on one of those shows is just career altering, isn't it?
Well, Gary Chandling, who plays Larry Sanders, I was watching an old interview with him again. You can go down rabbit holes with this stuff, and there are fantastic interviews with these people. Gary Chandling, sadly, no longer with us, and he said, he went to LA to make it as a comedian, and it took years, crafting material, just sitting there all day, writing jokes, joke after joke after joke. And Gary Chandling, they used to say, was so high wire in his approach to his art that sometimes he would just write the setup line and then go on stage and say it, thinking that the punchline would come to him.
No.
Yes. That's nerve.
That's unbelievable. So he's actually improvising the entire thing?
Absolutely. Anyway, he was working at the Comedy Store in Hollywood, and then he heard that the talent producer from Johnny Carson from the Tonight Show was going to come and see him. And he came, and he had a really good night that night. He says, it's real risky, might not happen, but it did. It was really good. And then the guy afterwards got in touch with him and said, I'm going to come and see you again to make sure it wasn't a fluke. And so the guy came a week later. You imagine how tense you are about that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a fluke, he killed again. He went really well. And so he was invited on Johnny Carson, and they said to him, it's pretty much, it's Thursday now. What are you doing Tuesday? What are you doing Tuesday? Would you like to be an international star on Tuesday? Because
your life will be completely altered. Yeah.
The power of the Tonight Show to change people's lives. So it was just unarguable. And so he went and did it on Tuesday. He was big success. They called him back. He did it 5 times.
Incredible.
Over, I don't know, a couple of years. He says, and only after the 5th time did Johnny invite me to join him on the sofa afterwards, because that was the honor everybody wanted. Because if you were invited to come over from the microphone and sit on the sofa, apart from just doing your set, it meant he decided you were here to stay.
Well, also that he improved on you on a personal level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But he had that kind of power. That kind of power could reside, amongst such a small number of people. It's absolutely astonishing. And but so I do recommend anybody who's never seen it, the Larry Sanders Show, and particularly pay note to Artie, who's played by Rip Torn, again no longer with us, the hard-nosed producer, who I was watching an episode yesterday where he fell out with the woman who sold the advertising for the network. It says, "Madam, I killed a man like you in Korea."
This is a junction in the word podcast. It separates that bit from this next bit.
You and I both suffer from that thing where people keep saying to us, "Oh, God, you wrote a review of so-and-so," and you've had no memory of writing this at all. Or you introduced somebody on telly, you introduced Kissing the Pink, or you interviewed Fish from Marillion, or you interviewed Status Quo, or you interviewed Sting or whatever, or Roger Daltrey. And you just simply cannot remember these things. And you had a really good example of that the other day, didn't you? When somebody rang up was it about Donovan, about a review?
Well, it was Stuart Penny, who's, I don't know, maybe a listener to this podcast. I kind of follow him on social media and so forth.
Yeah.
Stuart is probably around about my age, I should imagine. And Stuart appears to me to be the world's leading authority on Donovan.
I think he is. And he should be proud of it too.
Somebody's got to be.
Someone's got to be. And if you're going to pick somebody, Donovan, you could do worse.
Absolutely. And he has the advantage that obviously he was there at the time kind of thing, so he hasn't just picked it up in a back issue of Mojo. Anyway, and he sent me a message via Twitter and said, do you remember a review that appeared in Q? And he thought it was Q, late 90s of a Donovan album called Sutras, where the reviewer said that he apparently wrote 100 songs for this record, and I think it was Mark Ellen, he said. So he said, could you ask Mark? So I sent it to you, Mark. I said, have you got any memory of this?
It's October 1996.
So you then
I had a look at the Q, which I have them still here. The copy of Q from October 1996. It wasn't in that. It wasn't in the next one. But in the December one, there it was. It was reviewed by you. So I then sent you, and you had which is very funny, actually. And it did point out that, yes, he'd apparently written 100 songs. And but your punchline at the end is, if these are the 12 that finish up on the record, God alone knows what the remainder must have been.
It's a really unkind thing to say.
But you were in a bad mood. And a hurry, I'm sure.
And a hurry, I had no recollection of that whatsoever.
Yeah.
If somebody had said to me, you reviewed Donovan's Sutras in 1996, 7 or whatever, I would have said, no, I didn't. I will not have that said. That is
how dare you?
How dare you? Of course I had. And there's two things here. One is these reviews, when everybody had to write loads of reviews, they were flying past you at some kind of rate every week, every month, every day. You might have to do with Q. You might have to do like 6 or something like that. One long one medium,
bang them out in the morning.
And then a few, and you did your best. But the other thing is that now it is inevitable that whatever you wrote, even the least considered wisp of a review that you knocked out while getting in the office early one Friday morning, you know what I mean? Having listened to the record twice or something and just desperately trying to...
Will resurface.
Will come.
It will come back to haunt you.
It will come back.
Nothing ever dies.
There's an almost mathematical certainty about this. It's like, we talk about Donovan. Now, Donovan's pretty well known, but even Donovan had loads of records that nobody remembers at all. Even, dare I say it, Mark, in the future, Renia will have some little corner.
They'll have a little website where a few people gather to sit in a metaphorical ring of candles and weep about the fact that their record wasn't more successful.
And get in touch with the people.
Get in touch with each other and say, God, I love that bit on track 3.
No, but
the tambourine comes in.
Get in touch with the people who wrote dismissive reviews of them.
So how do you feel now? Ruined their lives.
I had a similar, not quite the same, but a similar case of this in the last week. It must be, is it the 50th anniversary of Rock Follies?
Yeah, it would be.
I think it's
now, wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's 73, would that be about right? Yeah.
Yeah. Which was a TV drama, comedy, musical, whatever. Did it run for like 6 episodes. And it was like a big deal in 1973. And starring Julie Covington, yes.
It was.
Charlotte Cornwell, yes.
Yep.
And Rula Lenska. Am I right in saying this?
Who went on to marry, didn't she?
Dennis Waterman.
I think so, yeah. There was
Julie Covington went on to do all kinds of interesting things. Subsequently, had the first #1 with Don't Cry For Me, Argentina.
She did, yeah.
Charlotte Cornwell was also, I think I'm right in saying, saying this off the top of my head, isn't she the sister of John le Carre?
I thought you were going to say Hugh Cornwell. Oh, right.
Whose real name is David Cornwell.
Oh, could be.
Anyway, it was written by Howard Shulman and Andy Mackay at Roxy Music did the music.
Yeah.
And it was about a girl group called, I think, the Little Ladies. Was it?
Yeah, that's right.
And if you were like me, a Little Feat fan working in a record shop, you loathed this thing on sight. You absolutely
anathema.
It was ITV trying to do behind the scenes in pop music.
You scoffed, didn't you, very loud in every aspect of it. And so it was completely kind of unrealistic.
And then what made it worse was that the soundtrack album came out on Island Records because Andy Mackay had done the music and was an enormous hit. Enormous hit for about a month. Went to number one, I think I might say. It was absolutely huge. So I'm working in a record shop, having to sell loads of copies of this record that I felt personally insulted by. Anyway. And so, I dismissed that.
I could just imagine you having to hold your nose as you put it in the plastic bag.
Really.
Or say, do you really want that? Or do you want a copy of, the
Doobie Brothers?
B-file? Exactly.
Captain and me. And anyway, Jude, our old mate Jude Rogers, I think Jude must have been writing some piece for, I don't know, the Guardian or somewhere about this anniversary. And she said, did anybody remember what they thought about this at the time? And I said, yes, I absolutely loathed it. It brought out all my worst rock snob tendencies. And then I had, subsequent to that, I had Matthew Sweet from Radio 3 getting in touch with me saying, I'm doing a thing with Andy Mackay to mark the 50th anniversary, and I'd like to put to him some of your objections. And he's like, did you remember what you thought? And I was saying, Matthew, it's 50 years ago for crying out loud. It's just what I thought off the top of my head. And it's like people want you to either apologize for what you thought or go back and listen to it again. It's like, it's pop music. What's the point? We don't have to be right about everything.
You don't have to be right, but also what you're forgetting is the context of that particular week or that particular month and what else was preoccupying, and all the other records were out that were infinitely better and more important.
Yes, yeah.
But you're so right. Rock Follies was just considered to be absolute tripe, wasn't it?
Well, because now it can be reassessed. Probably, using those two words as a so-and-so.
Three girls in a rock band.
Or whatever. And whereas all I just remember is it wasn't very good. That's what I thought, But here's the truth, that everybody gets their day in the sun eventually in pop music. Nothing is going to be forgotten. The afterlife is longer, obviously, than the kind of first flush of success.
Yeah,
which kind of brings me really inelegantly to the thing you and I were talking about the other day when Guns N' Roses popped up at Glastonbury, and they played at Tottenham, didn't they? I think they did a few weeks ago.
Yes, they did. Yeah, but Glastonbury certainly headlining, big thing,
So how long ago is that? I remember going to the States, and it must be 1988, 89, and MTV's in full flow and so forth. And I remember seeing these videos for Sweet Child of Mine, but more particularly Paradise City, which I was always interested in because they'd been directed by Nigel Dick.
Old pal of ours from Stiff Records.
Who we've had on these, on chats and Word in Your Ear since. And so I was always interested in these. And I thought they were really good videos. And I thought Paradise City particularly, I thought it was a really exciting record. And I thought, that's an exciting band. I can see them being huge. And it's only latterly I've thought to myself, was there ever a group in popular music history that had a shorter period of being good than Guns N' Roses?
There was a period of about 3 months when they were suddenly, even people who didn't like that kind of music thought that they were chic and fashionable and interesting, and didn't they? And then it just sort of faded out very, very rapidly.
It's just nothing I've heard by them ever since has had anything like that quality. And also, the other thing is that so much of it was about what they looked like. And they looked perfect.
They looked fantastic. And once they stopped looking fantastic, that made a huge difference too.
Absolutely.
I mean, all that stuff about Axl Rose looking like Benny Hill on Glastonbury was hilarious. And he's unrecognisable, isn't he? It's all right for Slash, because Slash is a cartoon. Slash is just a bloke with curly hair and a top hat and an electric guitar. And from a distance, he pretty much looks the same. Axl Rose used to be so gorgeous.
Absolutely. I fancied him.
Yeah.
The Word Podcast. Clearly, there is no plan.
I got a bit of correspondence from Giles Fraser. He points out that he's been listening to a couple of American podcasts recently where people haven't said people were drunk, but they've said that they were overserved.
That's good. Overserved.
Yeah. And he says, I reckon we'll hear this over here soon. He likes
overserved is good because it's almost like it's not their fault.
There you go. That's the point.
Because over-refreshed there is the British version of that, isn't it? Which is, that's clearly your own making. But overserved means that people keep saying, you must have another beer. Sure, no, honestly, I don't want. No, go on. One more won't do you any harm.
It always intrigues me when I watch American dramas that America, in my experience, is a country where if you go in a bar and you have a beer, and then you obviously do the British thing, which is, I'm going to have another one. Yeah. Americans will go, oh, you have another one.
I know. I remember going out for a drink with an American in a New York bar, and we had one, and I said, yeah, let's get another one. He said, oh, I'm fine. I said, what? I thought we were going to get a bit giddy here. He said, no, I mean, I'm not thirsty. I said, we're not drinking beer because we're thirsty. This is insane. But no, they have a totally different approach, don't they?
But I don't know, on the dramas, any kind of drama nowadays, or a comedy, or the lightest comedy, will invariably have some scene where the characters go to a bar and they're going to get hammered, and they're going to order shots and all that kind of stuff. And it's the kind of drinking that I've never really seen in real life. It sort of only exists on American dramas. I've never actually been party to that kind of thing at all. Whereas British drinking is just, it's more rhythmic. I'm here for a couple of hours. That will probably be 3 pints.
A session.
Or whatever,
it's a 3-pint session.
We
go a-pinting. That's right.
Go a-pinting.
Go a-pinting.
So, you're going to have an opportunity to come a-pinting with us in the near future, aren't you, Mark, after the summer?
Well, we're going to announce very shortly. Save these dates. We're going to have a podcast event in central London on the 25th of September, evening of. And another one in October on Monday the 16th. So Monday the 16th and Monday the 25th of September will be, we're going to have events which we shall announce fairly shortly. They'll be very good too.
Save the date, as they say. Make sure you do that. While you're there, if you haven't already done so, however you're listening to this or watching it or whatever, do make sure you like it or favorite it or whatever is the most appropriate way to signal your approval, assuming we have your approval, because that sort of stuff really, really helps us.
It does.
And, keep an eye out on YouTube for whatever's coming next on our Word in Your Ear channel. And if you haven't already joined the quiz on Friday evenings and you're a Patreon supporter, do make sure you do that. If you want to know about being a Patreon supporter, if you go to patreon.com/word in your ear, and you get full details there. Ta-ta.
See you next time.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.